right. Well, I like to keep these running as close to when I've told people it was going to start. So we are 9 o'clock, top of the hour. We've got a good number of attendees already on. So thank you all for jumping on and joining us here right at the top of the hour at 9 o'clock, just for June's edition of Lakeside Chats, which we've already had a lot of fun already with the WTF tagline to get everyone started. So hopefully everyone's excited about the idea of being able to use WTF in a completely different format than, let's be honest, what I usually use when I say WTF. But today's event is going to be specifically on when to fractional. And I've got two amazing faces, as you guys can already see, to join me in terms of being able to debunk and discuss the when to fractional concept. So I want to just, I am weird about introducing people, but I'm going to start with the idea that I'm going to tell a little story, just because I think it's always fun to know how the three of us got together, because I've already had people being like, how do you know John? And how do you know Katie? So it starts with about, what did we take, Katie, about 10 years ago now? I feel like Milo, I was pregnant when I worked at Thomson Reuters, and Milo turns 12 tomorrow. So 10, 12 years ago, Katie and I worked together in parallel roles at Thomson Reuters, and our paths continue to find ways to cross as both moms of ridiculously athletic and active children, but also just based on having that shared experience at Thomson Reuters. So when the concept and conversation around fractional has been brought up in a number of different opportunities. I think it's even brought up in some of the chats that we've had up until now through the rest of the year, that somebody had said, hey, you should talk to Katie. And I was like, cool, I love talking to Katie. I haven't talked to Katie in a while. So I talked to Katie and her and I discussed it. And she said, I bet I know someone else that you should bring onto the conversation as well. And that's how John got brought into the conversation as well. And John had been a name that I think I'd heard in passing about 100 times before. So I'm both very thankful that Katie brought us together, but also really grateful that the two of you were able to join us for June's Lakeside Chat. So with that, that's my introduction of you. But John, do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself, just to make sure that everyone gets an idea sort of why you are the foremost authority on talking about when to fractional today?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do. And thank you, Katie, for introducing us, and thank you for having us on today. I appreciate it. This is something I thoroughly enjoy, and hopefully I can add some value to your Lakeside Chat. I am John Arms, and I got involved in fractional in 2018 when I went fractional myself. We didn't call it fractional in 2018. We called it gig work. And it was funny, when I had my first engagement with the client, they said, so you're a gig marketer? I was like, close enough, right? Close enough. That's what I do. And they literally asked this question, like, when you're not working with us, are you like driving Uber? Like, the idea of what gig is and what gig was. So here we are, fast forward now in a full-on fractional capacity as an economy. And since then, I've written books about it. I teach at Voyageur University, teach others how to do this. I'm part of FRAK with the wonderful Katie, a great organization for it, and I'm a fractional CMO myself. So trying to advance all these wonderful little seeds of self-determination that I want to help plant worldwide. So that's me. That's my love for fractional.
Katie, how about you? You want to give your
Sure.
why you're here?
Yeah. So I left Thomson Reuters in 2018 and decided I wanted to be some sort of self-employed person, but didn't know what that might look like or could look like. And I tried a bunch of different things consulting wise, and someone introduced me to someone who was doing a fractional marketing agency. And it was sort of the serendipity of, like, if you keep showing up, the right connections will happen. And so I was introduced to fractional at a point where there was a real match between my skills and this agency's needs. And that was 5 years ago. And I've been doing it ever since. I work mostly on my own now, although I do work through another agency that'll find leads. So it's interesting to have different models and different ways to source new business. But my why was really around the fact that my kids were at an age where I needed to be home more, and I needed to be with them more. And the best way to do that was through self-employment. And fractional has been just an amazing way of going to market that gives me stability I need from a income perspective, while also giving me the time and flexibility I need.
Cool. Well, good. Well, thank you both for being here. And I know you've already sort of picked at a couple of the itches that I think we're going to get to throughout today's conversation, but I want to just set the stage. I know we've got roughly 50 people on already today, and I wanted to just set the stage. I know some of you are repeat customers, some of you are new to Lakeside Chat, so I want to just quickly run through rules of engagement. One, this is a recorded session. I record it for two purposes. One, I record it because I think sometimes there's some nuggets that people want to go back to, and so we'll send the link to the recording to all of you that have registered and are a part of today's event. But it'll also be available for future viewing, posted through the Lakeside website. So just so you guys know, it is recorded. I say that for two purposes too. For those on the attendee list, if just be thoughtful about what you say, because again, this is we got proof of whatever it is that you're going to say at this point. Like I said, so we've got access to the recording, and the links will be referenced. So I get the question obviously at some point throughout every one of the webinars is this deck going to be available, or is this recording going to be available? And the answer is yes to all of it. There will be referencing a couple different links and comments throughout. So I'll consolidate all of that and get that out to you probably by around this time tomorrow. So link to the recording, a copy of the deck. So I'll tell you the deck's not much today. And the any sort of links that we might reference, I'll make sure I get in that follow-up content as well. I try really hard to make these events be what I refer to as an underproduced webinar. What I mean by that is I really want to be in a position where those of you that are attendees engage as much as possible. So for those of you that have been on before, we want you to raise your hand if you got a question, use the chat, use the Q&A, react if needed. Your mics at some point, I might even be in a position where I will maybe even ask you to come offline and add to the conversation. So I want to make sure that you engage as much as possible as well. If you've got questions or you want to add to the dialogue, I encourage you to do so. But we want to keep that conversation positive and genuine. We want to keep it all in the vein of being able to really have some curious conversations. We recognize, John, Katie, I think we can all sort of attest to the fact that there is no right answer. We are in a position that though we might see ourselves as some element of an authority figure, it's not to say that there aren't other opinions that play in the sandbox with what we're saying as well. So this is information sharing and conversation starting at its best. So just as a quick reminder as to how I want you guys to use that. And so I want to just sort of set the stage for when to fractional, why to fractional, all the other WTFs that play into the concept of fractional. And we'll just start with a basic definition. And John, I hope you're okay. I stole this directly from, I think, the Voyageur website. Yep. When we're talking fractional today, we're talking three things. We're talking somebody who occupies a leadership role, is seen as a permanent team member. And I want to just sort of stop and pause there because I think that's one of those quick and easy areas that oftentimes gets mixed up in the concept of what fractional is. As you think exactly that they might be an in and out. And instead, what we see as fractional is somebody who's seen as a permanent team member, that they get to know you, your business, your organization. They have a feeling of embeddedness. And to Katie's point, that's not to say that they might not feel that sense of embeddedness with more than one company at a time, but they do feel like they are a permanent fixture of other companies that, in fact, that they work with. And then the idea of is that then their seat is filled in a fractional time as it's necessary. So the idea of it is, Katie kind of already referenced it, right? That you might have multiple clients that you're seeing in a fractional space. You might be their permanent, in your case, Katie, obviously marketing area, but you might be able to be that person for whatever that timeline applies in that permanent space. John, Katie, anything, did I cover that okay? Or any other points that you would add to the definition of how we're going to use fractional throughout today's conversation?
It's pretty much spot on. Katie, what do you think?
I think it works. I think that there's more you could look at if you're like, what's the difference between fractional and consulting and part-time? This definition of fractional sort of is our view of it, and you can see what's not there in terms of what a consultant or a part-time resource would do. But it's not project work, I think, is one of the biggest. I do project work, but I don't call that fractional work.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for that. And to your point, I think there's a lot of what's not included in there. I will note that I did write a blog just this past week. So if you go to the Lakeside blog on a little bit more of the what it's not piece of it, if you want to look at, is it full, is it part-time? No, it's not part-time. Is it Is it
Interim.
contract? Is it interim? Like, what are those things? And so if you want to look at that too, there's a blog post that kind of speaks to the what it's not as well. The other thing that I wanted to highlight here was just some of the very common ways that we're seeing fractional show up. So this is, again, our very favorite. I mean, I'm sure it's the foremost authority on all things ZipRecruiter. No plug here. Is there's 10, they created their top 10 list of where fractional is showing up. And the 10 that we're seeing, and I'm just going to read them right out here, is one you guys talked about already. It's chief marketing officer, fractional marketing, a controller, fractional sales, which I think is one of those areas where sometimes hear fractional sales and people get a little like, how does that work? Which I think is fun. Fractional CFO. So even here at Lakeside, we tap into the concept of using a fractional CFO because it's what works best for our size of business. Fractional business development, so similar to sales, but it might be in that same vein. Fractional CTO, or in that technology side of it. Fractional HR, which is my space of expertise or conversation. These other ones, the next ones I think is really funny just because in the interest of a top 10 list. Fractional pilot, because all of us might want a fractional pilot to serve. I mean, heck yeah, if I could put that on retainer, that'd be awesome. And then a fractional CIO. All right, so let's go to you guys. I want to just get the room talking a little bit. So hop into chat if you wouldn't mind. And I want to just ask everyone that's on the event right now, what has been your experience with fractional employment? Have you done fractional work? Have you hired fractional work? Have you do you work with somebody who's considered fractional? I would just like to get you guys in the chat talking in terms of getting your voice added to the conversation as well. So let you guys know the chat is open. Give me an idea as to kind of what your experience has been with fractional. Thank you, Monica. No experience. Thanks, Rachel. Rachel, good to see you. It's always funny when you have those like small world experiences where Rachel and I are friends through my sister-in-law, and then you see that she's on an event of yours, which is awesome to see.
Erin, while those chats come in, the list you had, or ZipRecruiter, that says all these fractionals. So I'm a little bit of a data nerd, and there's, I think the last thing I checked, there's about a little over 100,000 people on LinkedIn that self-identify as fractional something. And what we've seen at Voyageur and at FRAK, we've seen everything. Fractional legal, fractional ops, like everything. And that tells you something, that there's a desire not just by role or by industry, but there's something about what the life that Katie and I live as fractional pros that other people, regardless of what their role or skill or industry is, are attracted to. And I think that has a lot to do with, I think about a year and a half ago, that number was 2,000 people on LinkedIn. And now, I mean, it's growing exponentially across, and there's cultural and economic reasons for that. But it's interesting that ZipRecruiter has some right there, right? And there's so much more.
Yeah. And I think that the use of it is changing too, right? Which I think is interesting, especially as we go back to what that definition is, the idea of leadership. You notice even the ZipRecruiter aligns to that, right? Because we're seeing C-suite. But I do think that the idea of thinking about leadership also in a different vein is what's allowing the concept of fractional to continue to sort of ebb and flow and evolve as well. We're getting a nice mix of people who are curious about fractional, work with someone that's fractional, is fractional. It's nice to know that even in the room, we've got a nice mix of people that are attending. So what our goal for today's session is, we are going to, I tried everyone to sort of mix up the what we're doing here. And so today we are doing what I'm calling objection resolution. Katie and I knew each other, I said at Thompson Reuters, when I was a sales trainer. And so I used to make and force people in sales training do role plays with me. So now, John and Katie, you are now doing a role play with me, whether you knew it or not. That's what we're starting today. And so we're going to start with just 3 different objections. And we're going to start on the first side around becoming fractional. I know we have a number of people, even if I'm looking at the chat, that we've got a number of people that are curious about what that transition to fractional looks like, or what should they be thinking about. And I know that there's a lot of hesitation when it comes to the idea of thinking about becoming a fractional, to kind of leaning into what that fractional world might look like. And so let's start with the first one. All right, so fractional question number 1 is, and I'm just going to make sure I follow. So Katie, I'm going to pose this. Well, you're going to be my start one. I'm getting somebody with a weird, sorry, somebody was saying that they weren't able to use the chat feature. So I apologize, Jess, if that's the case. Q&A is open as well. I'll make sure I check both. All right, so Katie, I think I need more experience before I become or even consider being fractional. I think I need to be a jack of all things before I consider going into the fractional space. How would you handle that objection?
Well, I think that, and I mean, I just had this conversation with someone last week. It's maybe like if you're 22 and have never worked in a corporate setting, that's probably true. But beyond that, there's a spectrum, I think, of possibilities. And given that we are talking about roles that aren't just C-suite roles, I think we can have more imagination about if you want a fractional role and the idea of being embedded in a company on a fraction of the basis, but fraction of the time, but having a sort of meaty and substantial and ongoing role, like let's get creative about what that might mean. Because the person I was talking to last week was like, I'm not ready to be a fractional head of sales. I don't have that experience. I've never done it. And I'm like, well, that's maybe, but you're in a big company, so let's think about what a small company might need. And you'd be surprised at how the levels sort of change when you go into a much smaller company, and you might, as a director in a big company, have what it takes to be a fractional C-suite in a small company. So just keep your mind open to that. But then also, you don't have to be the head of sales. What do you want to do? Be a sales trainer, a fractional sales trainer? There are people who do that. Like we can carve out a role that you can go to market with that might very well serve a need in a small business. We just have to be creative about it.
I think it's interesting the way you put that too, because I think the idea of leaning into where your strengths are versus feeling like you need to be everything, right? I think that's a big part of it. And I think one of the conversations, I mean, I feel like in similar state with the conversations around even just in the HR space, right? Sometimes people in the HR space is like, I've been so heavy in talent acquisition, or I've been so heavy on the benefit side that I'm worried that I'm not the right fit for fractional. But the idea of it is you have a network. The idea that you have people, you have you have your own internal phone a friend concepts that you can lean into. You are their starting point. And I think that that's the other part of it too, is being in a place where it's not always what you know, but who you know. We all know that is important here. But then at the same time, being in a place to make sure that we're leaning into the area that's going to be most important. John, what would you add to what Katie said there in terms of needing to have that highest level of experience before you move into that fractional space?
Yeah, for sure. So two things come to mind. One, people tend to vastly underestimate their own value. We have teaching thousands of people. I just know this to be true. So there are people who come out of 20, 30 years in a big company or medium-sized company, and maybe because they've been laid off or in a maybe not in a senior role, they tend to not think of their value through the right lens. Like, oh, geez, I've never been the top person, right? I don't have the big giant resume stuff. And what I tell people is, listen, how long have you been working? Okay, 10, 20, 30 years. Well, every year is a walking MBA. Like you have the experience. You have the experience. You have succeeded and won and lost and failed like everybody else. And I think people tend to really underestimate their own experience and ability, which I encourage them not to do that, because the other side of it is to think about the client side. You know, where are they coming from a place of need, and what value are they seeking? And a lot of the time they're, you know, the CEO is also doing the COO work, or the CFO is doing, you know, they're doing this as best they can, trying to grow, fractionally in their own mind, doing the work of somebody else. And so you have to really understand, like, well, I may not feel like I've got all of the experience or chops, but gosh darn, this company doesn't have any in what I do. Mm-hmm. And together we can advance the ball on their behalf. So those are two dimensions I see all the time that, of course, we educate people out of.
Yeah, I think the other part, and what I'm hearing you both say, and you see that in a lot of capacity, right, is the idea of being able, it's really hard to see the thing that's easy for you to do as something that's hard for somebody else to do. And I think that the case, right? If something seems easy, you devalue it or you undervalue what you can bring to the table because it's easy. Anybody can do it. If it's easy for me, it means it's easy for everyone else. And we oftentimes overlook that easy for us isn't easy for everyone else.
So true. Absolutely true.
Add one more thing there.
The other thought I would add is that I've been pleasantly surprised at how open my clients are to the truth of like, I don't know how to do that thing. Like if something comes up and I don't know how to do it, I'll just say, I don't know how to do that. We'll figure it out together, or we'll find someone. And like, I never have to pretend that I know something that I don't. Because especially if you can find places that have a learning culture or CEOs who sort of understand that you don't know everything, they're just glad you're there to figure it out, so they don't have to.
I love it. All right, let's move into the fractional world. I need to be full-time. I need full-time work. I need to make sure I'm working full-time. John, how do you, when you're posed this question, how do you manage through that objection?
Yeah. So what I tell people is what's on the other side of fractional, because everybody knows what full-time looks like. It's a very well-worn path. There's no mystery there. The mystery is what's on the other side, what's the revenue, what's the benefits. They're trying to match their current state with the fractional state. And a couple of things from the education standpoint, I say, well, I get that. And of course, you want the revenue that you had before. You have to think about it in terms of your own portfolio. So what you're really looking for probably isn't full-time work. You're looking for full-time pay. You want your money to equal what it was before, especially since there's a lot of people who have full-time work that absolutely hate it. And so what I tell people is like, think about yourself as a portfolio. You're going to have 3 to 5 clients, maybe 3 are fractional and 2 are project. And through that portfolio, you're going to earn what you were earning before and some change in the ability to pay for your own healthcare and things like that. They don't understand that because fractional is all new to them. But so I encourage people, think about the core of that question. Like, do you really need to be in an office for 40 hours a week? Is that a high, like, do you feel that you need that? And of course, here we are in remote work and there's that. Do you need to be in the current state of meetings, right? Like 6 hours a day of meetings, like that equals full time. Do you need to be in meetings 6 hours a day? So when you really try to understand what full time means, what most people are saying is, I need the cash and I need the bennies. That's where I am right now. And of course, that fractional it replaces that through a path and a course and a learning curve, but and it doesn't put you in meetings for 6 hours a day. So there's a big learning curve there.
Yeah. Katie, anything that you want to add to what John said?
Yeah, I think that I've also heard people say that in the context of, I don't know how I would get my work done in less than full time, or I don't know what I would do with myself if I didn't work. Like the mindset, right? Of like, is it okay not to be working full time? And so there's some mindset work, I think, that you get the opportunity to do when you're a fractional, to say like, I am going to divorce myself from the notion of the 40-hour work week. And that can be really uncomfortable for people. And like, you continually are giving yourself permission to not be in your butt in the seat all the time. And what you learn through that is that actually the work does get done if you are thoughtful about it without you being there full time, because they don't want to pay you $250 or $400 an hour to do data entry, which is some of the crap you might have been doing in your other or like busy work. So you have to be very thoughtful about what you're doing versus what you're bringing in other resources to do. And sort of like that becomes this iterative journey where you're like, someday you won't think twice about not working on Wednesday afternoons or eating lunch with your spouse because you can't. Like you won't think twice about it. But I know in the beginning, you're conditioned to that sort of 40-hour a week mentality, and you just continually give yourself the gift of permission to let that go.
We are getting
a great hack on that is I don't know if you two have the book 10x is better than 2x. is I mean that book gets into that, and Katie's living that life, and so am I. It's like, listen, the science is out, right? We're only really great at what we do 20% of the time. And that's the whole idea. It's the Pareto rule applies. Like if you have 10 hours in a day, 8 hours is by nature not going to be that great, not super high valuable. 2 hours will be very, very high value, very highly valuable. So 10x is better than 2x is a great way to sort of understand how to be a successful fractional in that mindset versus the full-time mindset.
We've got the chat is, I love some of the questions that are coming up, and I do want to make sure, so there was a comment in the Q&A that I don't want to lose. So at some point, remind me to go back to it from Marie, who wants to talk about the kind of that shift, that mindset shift from 1099 and W-2. So let's talk a little, make sure we'll bring that one back at the very end. Katie, I want to throw this one at you, is the idea of, and we've talked about it, right? We talked about the mindset of 40 hours, but then there's this idea, and John, you sort of scratched the surface on the idea of how much do I get paid? And so then there's this concept of like, how do I sell myself? And the idea of, I don't know if I can sell myself enough to make enough money, right? That's the awkward, uncomfortable part of it. So Katie, what do you tell people when they're thinking about the idea of having to sell thyself to be able to serve and to be able to make enough money to be in that where they can be fractional?
Well, I think one thing I tell them is it's not as hard as you think it is. So just start practicing and talking about money and get really comfortable about that. Another thing would be maybe you don't have to sell yourself, because maybe you can work through someplace like Lakeside HR. Like there are lots of paths where someone else might do your business development for you. I don't want to give that control up, so I don't work exclusively through an agency, but those options are out there. And the third thing I'll tell people is, if you're not uncomfortable enough to go learn how to sell yourself, then maybe you should stay in corporate. Like there's like at some point you're going to get uncomfortable enough and you're going to want to change enough that you're going to have to move through the discomfort of learning how to sell yourself. And then when you are ready to do that, there's places like John or other coaches that can help you do that. You don't have to do it by yourself, but I believe that if you're sort of hanging back saying, I can't do this because I don't know how to sell, that's a story you're telling yourself. There are 100 ways around and through that. You just have to make the decision that you're willing to get uncomfortable in order to get to the other side of where you're at.
You bet.
All right, John, what would you add? And to what Katie said, just one little piece there. I wanted the other part too is there's you don't have to live, that exclusivity component isn't necessary either, right? Yeah, being in a place where there are a lot of different people out there that can help and support that, helping you find the work. I think the idea of the comfort about the money part is part of it, but then I also think the comfort of just the networking side of it and helping other people help find you that work is also important. Sorry, John, what were you?
No, that's good. You know, we have these limiting beliefs, we sort of put rails up around us, maybe to protect ourselves, but you know, these thoughts that are in here, and I don't know how to sell, you sort of stop before you even start. And which is really, you know, those who are on the other side of fractional learn how to work through that. I will tell you that selling yourself in fractional is not selling at all. We all have the wrong idea of what sales is. We think it's gross. We think it's pushy. You know, we all have the wrong idea of what it is. What it is in reality is Katie knowing me knowing Katie, and the tens of thousands of other fractionals saying, hey, I've got somebody I know who was just telling me they got a marketing problem. You're a good person. We've talked before. Let me make a referral to you here. That's literally how it goes. I mean, most jobs in fractional are referral based. So you don't have to know how to sell yourself, but you do have to know how to put out good vibes and help others and network. It's so simple, but it's the walls we put up. We think selling is one thing. Think of the word this: never sell, because it never works. Share. It's just about sharing. That's it.
Yeah. I want to go back before we switch over to the why to hire fractional. So again, we've started down the path of why to become. And so I want to go back to Marie's question just to see if either of you have any sort of quick and easy sort of tips and tricks. I've not done it, right? I haven't made the switch shift from going to that 1099 mindset. I've stayed in the full-time capacity. So I want to just get your guys' insight in terms of W-2, 1099 conversation, just because I want to make sure that we don't lose that piece of it. And Maria, I want to make sure we get your question answered.
So the question is?
How do we I'll read it. I'll read it specifically. How do we shift to a 1099 mindset and potential for W-2 and 1099 mindset?
Is that from an owner?
She said, what tips do we have in getting up to speed on leveraging LLC related to taxes?
I can't tell if that's from a hiring side or if that's from a fractional side.
All right. Well, Marie,
and that's because my brain is small, by the way. That's fine. Usually the reason why.
Marie, do you mind taking yourself off mute real quick and then asking the question your way so we make sure we get to it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this amazing conversation. So pursuing different options, sometimes through an agency, sometimes direct. So there have been scenarios where it was more advantageous to be a W-2 and others where it's more advantageous to be 1099. As an HR person, I'm very concerned about following the rules. And so I'm always amazed at how comfortable some people are with using their LLC corporate card to pay for everything and seemingly write everything off. And it's like, I've talked to my accountant and he's like, well, I can't tell you where you can bend the rule. So how can I get savvy on what is a legitimate way to leverage my LLC to maximize my earning potential?
Through the lens of taxes.
Well,
is that right? Yeah.
And I mean, taxes are a part of it. So for example, if I partner with agencies, sometimes I've been able to be a 1099. I have to show proof of my insurance that I have for my LLC. Other times, depending on the engagement, it might be worth it to be a W-2 to be able to participate in a 401k, for example.
Sure.
So if I'm doing both, there's been a tax year where I've had a W-2s and 1099s. I feel like I'm leaving money on the table.
We have a couple people who are really good at tax, and this gets into the structure of it. So I'm not probably the best person to answer that, other than to say.
She cut out, or
did I cut out?
No, I hear you.
Oh, okay. The way I would look at it is, you can do both. Obviously, you can do 1099 and W-2, unless you're in a state that for some reason has some rule that we're not aware of. But the revenue is the thing to think about, right? Whether it's coming through a 1099 door or a W-2 door. What the only answer I can give or insight I can provide here is you are worth a lot more than you think. And so make sure you're getting paid for that. So wherever it comes on the back end through the lens of taxes, make sure you're getting paid for that. People tend to undervalue their fractional, like what you're worth to a company. So that may be a sloppy answer, mostly because I'm not a tax advisor or wealth advisor.
And Marie, we can always get back to you too. I can see if I think part of it is when we've got the right people in the room. So if there's somebody else that sort of can give Marie some, we'll make sure we get you more information to help answer that question as well. But I want to keep rolling because I do want to start talking about the other side of it. So now we've talked about becoming. Now I want to talk about the hiring side of fractional. And so obviously from the Lakeside perspective, right, we offer a fractional HR consulting model. We're working it with the small to mid-sized businesses, organizations that don't have or have a very small to lean HR team, but we're managing through these objections on a regular basis. I want to throw these at you guys to help me. This is all about me at the end of the day, guys. It's 50
Understood.
people on a call. It's all about making my job easier. But all right, so first objection we get is, can't we just use our internal talent? Can't the front desk person just be our person that does all this stuff? Don't we have enough of that work internally? John, what's your approach to, can't we just manage this internally?
Yeah, I think the key word there is manage. People do look at it that way. Businesses that are smaller, and by that I mean up to several $100 million in revenue, they have a DIY mentality. Let's just do with it let's handle it with what we have inside. I did a little bit of a mini study with Claire Price at Occitane. She's a great fractional advisor. Anyway, we discovered that people hold on to their stuck place longer than they should. Like, let's just use internal, or Mary's CFO, so let's have her do the COOing. There's a nature to want to handle it with the resources you have, and that makes sense. However, what is the temperature or the degree of the problem? Because if you've got an intern who has a degree in marketing, but you've got $1 million marketing problem, That is not a good way to solve that. It is the wrong tool. So I always advocate, you need, in this economy and where we are and where we're going, you need the highest level of wisdom you can have. That is what will carry you forward. The idea that you can just find a warm body and that'll take care of the problem, that is a managerial way to look at it, but is not a strategic way of looking at things. Solve the problem at its core.
All right, Katie, your turn.
Well, I've seen a lot of companies that have tried different agencies and they've brought in different resources and haven't gotten what they needed from them. And so I understand and have a lot of empathy for the desire to handle it in-house because they've spent money on external resources and they haven't gotten good results. And so a lot of what I talk about is like, there's a disconnect, and whether this is you're using agencies or you're hiring inside, there is always a disconnect between the business aspiration and how they see their ability to grow and what the work that those resources are doing. And there is a level of expertise that comes in this translation between business aspiration and execution. And so I am not selling you like executing your marketing campaigns. I'm selling you making sure that the connection between what your business wants to do and what your output is solid. And I believe that does take wisdom and expertise that you don't necessarily have in-house. And so, yeah, if you just want to manage what you've got and grow at the same rate or manage your top line at the same pace, then maybe you are fine doing it internally. But if you want to grow and you haven't been able to do that the way you've been doing it in the past, then let's try something different.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good way to look at it. Martha, we'll make sure we get to your question too, because I think it's going to show up here in one of these next objections as well. But Katie, John, you already talked about the intern. So Katie, I'm going to throw this one at you. Shouldn't we just hire someone young and cheap to do this work?
Right, because it's just social media. So let's get a 23-year-old to do that. I mean, sure, except that what are they going to do? Like, how do they know what to do? Who's teaching them? And how are they growing too? And so, again, you can do that, but you're not gonna solve the disconnect between what your business is trying to do in the world and the output that young and cheap person is getting. And so let's get someone in at a fraction of the price, because sure, you don't need to spend $400,000 on a CMO. Like, that's ridiculous for where you are in your business, but you might need to spend $100,000 on a CMO this year and then allocate that other money to young and cheap resources. But then they're going to know what to do and they're going to know how to measure it. And they're going to be able to talk about their results to you in the language of your business growth, not necessarily in number of followers that you got on social media.
John?
Yeah, certainly, I mean, I totally get that sentiment, right? You want to keep your costs as low as you can. And we get that. We all want to do that. But that you're never going to cut your way to growth, right? That never happens. So in order to grow, you need some wisdom. Young and cheap is not going to help you. The other thing I think everybody has to be cognizant of is the state of the world we're in right now, the way work is. We are going full speed into an AI-centric economy. We are in the knowledge economy. Whether we like fully embrace it or not, the next 50 years is not going to be about grind. Grind, young and cheap, hours, that model is dying so fast because we've learned how to replace that young and cheap stuff. Young and cheap can't give you wisdom. Young and cheap can't take you aside and say, don't step that direction, you're going to ruin your company, right? Only wise people can do that. And every company needs that. But we have to be aware of our surroundings, because those who choose to grind their way through, it's not looking good. And if you've done that before, you probably have already felt that. Yeah. Maybe you're on your third young hire and there's something wrong with them, and you sort of realize maybe it's not them, maybe it's us.
Yeah. I think that I appreciate what you guys said, because I do think that there's it's what the work is in one regard, right? It's the idea of what the work is. And it goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning. It's that definition of what fractional is. It's that leadership level. It's that
that's right
position. So we want to make sure that we're balancing this idea of like, if the work is X, then yes, maybe tongue in cheek makes sense. But if the work is high level strategic work and you need to make sure you need to help and grow your business, then, but you don't have the money or the budget to pay for it, totally fine. Don't pay for full time, pay for fractional, right? That's the vein here, and the idea of being able to say it's a matter of what the work looks like. Go ahead, John.
So one thing, if you're asking yourself that question, I think those companies that are asking themselves, I think you owe it to yourself and your team to back up, and your investors to say, why are we asking that question? Where are we? Because that is not a very strategic question at all. It is merely trying to survive the next 30 days or the next budget cut. The reality is, pull yourself back. What are we trying to accomplish? What's our mission? What's our vision? What's the big number goals? Very rarely do you answer, I need to overwork my current staff to get there, or I need somebody I haven't met who just came out of college to get there. You usually wouldn't say those two things. So I would encourage everybody, go back to your plan. Go back to your plan and see if these questions answer to your plan. Very rarely do they do that.
Yeah. All right. Last big objection. I don't know if I need, even if in a full-time space, I don't know if I can keep them busy enough. I don't know if there's enough work to keep them busy. Katie, do you want to, and actually, John, let's let you start with this one. Kind of, how do you overcome the idea of how busy do we keep a fractional person?
Yeah. So here's the great news on this, everybody, is you don't. Fractionals keep themselves busy. You don't have to worry about your fractional. We're leaders. We do not even understand that question, to be honest with you. We think of goals and objectives and accomplishing mission, being an ally, helping the business move forward, right? And that's how we're wired. That's what we're there for. So you don't have to manage us. Very often, guess what? We're going to be knocking on your door, maybe a little more than you're used to. Did you think about this? Did you think about that? So it is that ally that comes in. The fractional is like, we're not looking for hours, right? We're looking to solve stuff. And so that is a managerial question, isn't it? How do I keep this person busy? When in fact, when the fractional comes in, like, oh, they got this stuff. They understand this sales stuff. I don't, right? They're on it. It's just not a reality. It just doesn't happen in fractional that I've ever seen.
Katie, what would you add to that?
I mean, I guess I just co-sign all of that. I usually have more to do than time and scope to get it done. I'm pushing them.
It's the other way around.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Martha, I want to, your question, I'm worried I might not do it justice. Do you mind just taking yourself off mute quickly and asking it yourself just to make sure? I know you're getting some answers in the thread as well, but I would love for you to be able to pose this question to the panel.
Yeah, no, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. And Maggie, your answer also makes a ton of sense. So if you're in a situation where you're focused on a first engagement, and so my expertise is in operational optimization and change management for large contact centers. And so this organization is a not-for-profit, and they're in a situation where they really need to basically transform their customer service experience, because there were a lot of mergers and acquisitions that happened over the last 10 years. And so they merged in name, but not in back office. And so my role was doing exactly what John said, is don't continue to do this or you're going to get bought by United Health Group or another company. So you need to figure this out quickly. And so I'm at a point right now where I did my assessment and I'm giving them the information that they need and helping them build a roadmap. But I also want to continue to be a part of that. And so I'm just trying to figure out, how do you set yourself up for success in that situation when I know that they're budget constricted?
Oh, that easy softball of a question. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
John, Katie, take it away. I have a couple thoughts, but I have a feeling anything I say is not going to sound nearly as profound as what you guys have here.
I heard budget constriction. I heard strategic planning. I heard a lot in there. Can we sharpen the knife of the question just a little for my small brain?
Sure. I think what I'm concerned about, and maybe, I'm new to this ball game too. So
Mhm.
what I'm concerned about is that they're going to take the information, and this company has had multiple big consulting firms come in over the last 10 years that are
Mhm.
basically, I'm telling them exactly what they told them, but I'm giving them practical applications to make it actually happen
Mhm.
without the technology piece,
Sure.
because they're not going to be able to
Sure.
fund that yet.
Yeah.
And so now that we're at the place where I'm saying, okay, here's your playbook,
Yep.
here's how you need to start doing this,
Yeah.
but I still want to be a part of it. And so,
Totally. You need to be.
yeah. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I tee
I
that
got
up
you.
with the woman that I'm working with?
I got you. I got you. Okay, so this happens all the time, and here's the way to think about it, and help your client think about that too. I think the best sort of is it a metaphor? Fable? I don't know. Best way to answer this is with the surgeon and the knife. I can give a surgeon a scalpel. I can take a surgeon's scalpel, right? But I sure as hell can't take out my appendix, right? You need the surgeon, you need the leader, you need the person who's done all the study. There, there is no such thing as just a playbook that just self-drives, as you know, and there certainly isn't a playbook that just self-executes without what? An amazing leader. So that's the value you bring, right? Your leadership value, and this is really what businesses are learning. Like, oh my God, I could never do this myself. I can't. I got too much to do, right? I'm building relationships and all this. So when in the book and in the coursework, we talk about this, about that is the indispensable ally you become. The nature of, like, here's the playbook, and I'm the quarterback. What did somebody else say not too long ago? Quarterbacks don't catch their own passes, right?
Yeah.
Someone has to lead the thing, and you're perfectly well suited to be that person. In fact, for them, you're the most affordable person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And I love your analogy. I think it's also, the other analogy is, if you always use the same hammer, you're always going to hit the same nail.
All the
So,
time.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
But okay. Well, I appreciate that. You're giving me some energy, some juice to be
Go
able
get
to
it.
do this
Right.
today.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
it
being on.
happens all the time. That's totally common, and you should lean into that spot. You're the leader. You're the surgeon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you for adding your voice to Lakeside Chat too as well. It's again, this is why this is the loveliness of, you don't know what every event we could have prepared every day, but the idea of what the event will look like will look a little different. Another quick question as before we move into sort of closing this out, because I wanted to make sure we threw it out to the group here to sort of, what other objections are you guys having? Where is your kind of, what is sort of the gut check you're having in this space? Sarah asked the question, as a new fractional, what's the best advice you can find to get started or to help find clients?
I think the best advice I can give is to start showing up and telling your network what you're looking for and what you want, and then taking all the meetings you can take after, like introductions, and so in that you have to let go of the idea that if I talk to this person, then this exact thing will happen. It's just talking to people and being super open about what you want.
That's 100% right. I would say to go to that very well prepared and know thyself.
Yeah.
It's not enough to say that I'm a fractional marketer. It's not enough to say that I'm a fractional HR person. There's a deeper level to all of us. And the effort and exploration to really understand your value and how you articulate it, how you lean into it, absolutely comes through when you're out there doing exactly what Katie just said.
I'll give you an example of that, knowing thyself, and that that has sort of, like, I continue to evolve in that. In the last few months, I've started talking about, like, I'm not a visionary CMO. I'm an integrator CMO. If you're talking in EOS terms, like, I am not going to come in and build you a beautiful brand campaign. I mean, I might, if that's what we need. I'll go find the people that do that. But, like, I believe I'm harnessing the wisdom and of the visionaries in the business and then making it actionable. I had to know myself well enough to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm also probably not going to tell you where your best opportunities for growth are, like which adjacent market you should go into. I have an MBA and I've done some of that work, but that's not where my head goes right away. Like if you need someone to tell you your path to growth, it's probably not me. But if you know what you want to do and how you want to grow, but you don't know how to make it happen, that's me.
Yep. Thank you, Katie. All right. Well, I want to make sure that we give ourselves just enough time on the back end to talk about what else we're working on. And if there are additional questions, we keep the chat open for that space. So, John, Katie, I know one of the things that so Kristen, who I know is on here, had attended the FRAK conference last year and got a ton of value out of it in terms of being able to change the mindset around fractional, which was also part of the reason why when your names all came together, I was excited about just knowing the energy and knowing that that's coming up as well. Do you guys just want to take a quick second and talk about kind of those sources for fractional? I know that there's been questions around the tax side of it. There's been questions around the selling side of it. I know that many of these things are talked about in the course of some of these things that you guys have coming up. John, Katie, do you want to just, you guys pick it up. You figure out who can rock, paper, scissors.
Sure. Katie, you want to talk about FRAK?
Yeah. So I'll set it up because we talk a lot at the Fractional Conference about what we are and what we aren't. And what we are firmly is part of an ecosystem of support that helps people become more successful at being fractional. And so the part that I work on within this ecosystem is the Fractional Conference. It's an in-person event. This year it'll be in Minneapolis again, our second annual event. We had 200 people there last year. We are aspiring to 500 attendees this year, and we're setting big, hairy goals for ourselves, and we're pushing it. We have an amazing roster of speakers lined up. You can see that on the website. Lots and lots of opportunities to connect with other fractionals and other business advisors who are also selling into these small businesses, because we can't help you find your next fractional goal, but we can fractional role, but we can help you find the people that'll help you find your next fractional role. So we're all about community and great programming there, but that's not the be all end all. And so there's these other two resources that John can talk about.
Sure. So going left to right, Voyageur, we teach fractional to people who want to hire them and people who want to become that. And the thing to think about is none of us were trained how to be fractional through the course of our career over the last 20, 30, 50 years, whatever. It just wasn't a thing. And I learned that the hard way, failed a lot, and decided to turn it into coursework to help others. So that's what Voyageur is. It's there needs to be education on how to do this on all sides and how to thrive there. So that's what we're dedicated to at Voyageur. And then Fractionals United is Karina Mickley out of New York, and she's created an online community. It's a Slack community where I think there's 10,000 fractional pros like us and growing. It's a place where we can connect and engage together back and forth throughout the year at all times of the day. So it's super helpful, and I encourage you to look into all of these if you're either hiring fractional or becoming that, because this has become what is being referred to lately as sort of the trifecta of fractional. This is sort of where it's the home of the knowledge and the people and the center of gravity, these three entities. So good to look into all of them because they will help you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right. And so then I will do my own little plug here. So again, thank you for all of the 50 plus, I think we were close to 60 on at one point in time that were on today's event. I do Lakeside Chats once a month. So as an opportunity to both be, to represent Lakeside HR Group as the thought leader that we want to continue to be in the market. So fractional was one of those topics that we found ourselves, one because we offer fractional, and two, because it just seems like it's a conversation we're having a lot. And so John, Katie, thank you so much for participating in this month and adding your voice to the conversation. I can tell even just from the chat that you guys are already have scratched the itch for a number of people, but also given some motivation and inspiration where needed. I hate to sort of take it down a negative path, but we're going to talk compliance next month, which is always everyone's favorite talk. But in what I'm learning as I maintain my level of thought leadership is coming into both Minnesota and to our throughout the United States, is there's a number of new compliance rules that are going to have a direct impact, not on just big business, but in particular on small business. And so for July 23rd, Same bad time, same bad channel. The link and everything will get shared with you in the follow-up materials. I have Lauren, who's the director of workplace workplace development policy for the Minnesota Chamber, is going to be on talking about the compliance components that are coming for Minnesota, in particular, businesses in Minnesota. And then we've got Sarah Joy coming on to talk about the Secure 2.0 rules that are going to impact small business from investment retirement perspective as well. So we'll get that link out to you guys as well. My last ask for those of you that are still on listening is I'm going to also ask that you do a quick survey for me. We have now done 6 Lakeside Chats. And so we are halfway through a year. And though I've got content, thank you, John. Though I've gotten content situated for July, I want to get your guys' voice around what we want to continuously see going through the remainder of 2024. And then hopefully as we start to build content into 2025. So if you wouldn't mind taking a quick second, completing the survey, giving me some tips and ideas as to what else you would like to hear, what other events it would make sense for you to take, an hour's worth of your Tuesday morning aside to listen to. I want to make sure we're providing content that is most appropriate to the audience that has been so great to me so far. So thank you all for doing that. And if you wouldn't mind completing that survey, that would be awesome. And that's it, guys. We ended a little early. John, Katie, I felt like we're talkers, and amazingly enough, than I ever would have thought.
A lot of discipline.
Yeah, it was a lot of discipline. Yeah.
There's that run of show that I sent you. You have 5 minutes, no less. No
Yeah,
more, right?
yeah. You did a great job. This was great. I am very grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
And thank you guys all. The chat's been great. I'll make sure, John, Katie, as follow-up to you guys, obviously I'll send you the list of who was on for today, but I'll also send you the chat. So if there's comments in particular that you think it makes sense for you to follow back to. So for those of you that engaged with the chat today, just know that you didn't go in a space where went on any element of deaf ears. We'll make sure that we get you some additional content to support whatever additional questions you guys have. So with that, have a great Tuesday. I hate that I have to keep saying this, but stay dry, everyone. And John, thanks for joining us from the Lakeside.
You bet.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.